Good afternoon, everyone. Everyone listening, watching on TSN2. This is Overdrive. I'm Matthew Cauz. That is Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star. Remember, stream us at tsn1050.ca. Get us on the iHeartRadio app. And you can listen to us on your home speakers as well. Keegan Matheson is going to join us in a couple minutes, MLB reporter, Blue Jays reporter for MLB.com. That's the proper way of putting it. Before he joins us, just baseball question. Is there anything more annoying than the intentional walk? Now, when the Blue Jays intentionally walked Aaron Judge, that really annoyed me because the Blue Jays aren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Let the young guys pitch against the best hitter in the American League.
That's a good point.
And I get it from a strategy standpoint, but over the weekend, the last 9 games, a Yankees' recent homestand, he was walked 12 times. 6 of them were intentional. I get it. I understand it. It is a winning formula for to defeat the Yankees. He is their best hitter. But as a baseball fan, there is nothing more unsatisfying than seeing the best batter in the American League stroll to first base.
It's an incredible testament to the power of Aaron Judge.
I know.
The batting eye of Aaron Judge, the skill of Aaron Judge that we're having this conversation because you haven't seen it maybe since Bonds in this way, right? Like, and you say, he's been walked 12 times in that series, 6 of them intentional. The other 6 weren't officially intentional, but they were pretty close to intentional, right?
Yeah.
We're just not giving them pitches.
I've always said there needs to be a statistic for, we're not intentionally walking you, but we may give you 1 pitch in the strike zone. We may. We'll consider it.
Or even you're right, they have that data now, right? They could basically say, in those 6 walks, he got X number of pitches in the strike zone. And I bet there's not too many, right? But I get it. Look, you're trying to win the game. I understand the strategy. And the bottom line is if the Yankees don't punish you because of the strategy, like if Giancarlo Stanton's not hitting behind Aaron Judge and he's an easy out compared to Aaron Judge, of course you're going to walk Aaron Judge to get to Stanton, right?
Yes. Now,
it's only good strategy.
I am a hypocrite in many ways. If the Jays were leading the American League East or in a battle with the Yankees in the American League East and Aaron Judge is at the plate, I am screaming at my TV screen, walk that man right now. What are you doing? Don't throw the ball anywhere near him. In fact, just throw just walk him right away.
Right.
But when I'm just watching the Yankees against someone else or when the Blue Jays are 12 games under 500, I'm like, I want to see these 2 individuals do battle. I want to see pitcher versus batter. I want to be entertained. No, but I am a hypocrite. In certain situations, I would think it's foolish.
Well, it was yesterday that's what happened, right? They walked Judge. It was Rangers, Yankees. Rangers walked Judge. Stanton comes up. Stanton hits a home run. That's the way to stop the intentional walking of Aaron Judge, right? Giancarlo Stanton's got to do that. And he hasn't been doing that on a regular basis. Obviously, he's had an injury-plagued year, but ultimately, you're right. It's no fun. Aaron Judge is so good. He's one of those guys. It's like Shohei Ohtani. It's like Mike Trout in his prime. It's like Bonds was in his prime. If you happen to be anywhere near a TV or a device that has TV on it, and those guys are up, you want to see that at bat, right? As much as you can.
Question for you, and you can answer later. I'll ask it to Keegan. Is there a greater tip of the cap to how excellent an opponent is than when Barry Bonds would get intentionally walked when the bases were loaded?
No.
Because that happened.
I know.
Even more than double teaming a wide receiver, whatever you want to do. I think it's the ultimate tip of the cap. Keegan Matheson, Blue Jays reporter for MLB.com. Keegan, I throw that out to you. Intentionally walking a batter when the bases are already loaded. Can you think of a bigger compliment an opponent can give someone else?
No bigger compliments. A little embarrassing it has to feel when you do that. You're admitting out loud that this guy's probably going to drive in at least 2 runs. Let's just let him have 1. It's amazing to look back on those Barry Bonds seasons. The stats don't make sense. They look like there's a mistake on the stats page. It's absolutely amazing. But to walk a guy with the bases loaded, you are admitting that he's good, and you are admitting that you don't think you're very good, I think, at the same time.
How angry do you think pitchers get when they hear, wait a minute, I got to walk him? But there's a guy on first, there's a guy on second, there's a guy on third. What am I doing? I have an arm here. Let me use it. I wonder how angry pitchers get at the pitching coach.
Yeah, it depends on the guy. If you are a young pitcher, you might nod and say, okay. I do not want to be the guy that has to tell someone like Chris Bassitt that he has to walk a guy. I think that might be a bit more of a debate, probably a debate of which we cannot read the full transcript here on the airwaves of TSN Radio. But it's man, that would be an interesting conversation.
Okay, speaking of Chris Bassitt, Keegan, since you brought up that particular name, what's the conversation if you're the Blue Jays PR guy and he's just finished a press conference where he insists that getting shelled by the Oakland Athletics had everything to do with the roof being closed and not so much to do with Chris Bassitt not being very good?
Well, I missed this. I know the Blue Jays have done extensive renovations to Rogers Center. The outfield district, the seats. They've also added a roof, apparently, in the last year. This is news to nobody. That roof has been there a lot. He has pitched and succeeded with that roof closed a lot. Now, this is a conversation pitchers have. Go back 7-8 years, R.A. Dickey had this conversation all the time with his knuckleball, using words that I cannot pronounce about how that ball would move. Go back a few years, Ross Stripling comes to mind. He would talk about this a lot with his changeup, how the air patterns and whatnot affected that. Now, with Chris Bassitt going into this one, that surprised me. That kind of came out of nowhere. It's not a complaint I've heard from him before. And Oakland was all over him. Bassitt said he had to completely alter his mechanics to try to get more sink on his sinker. And as he was riffing off numbers, you heard him say those numbers off the top, he was talking about the amount of movement, how much the sinker was sinking. He had clearly come to the cameras prepared with those numbers. I always respect a well-researched man, but that one was surprising, not one I was expecting. And that roof has been around for a while.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years at least. But I got to do my research to find out how long it's been there for. I think that the issue is what he said in a vacuum was actually interesting, especially if you're just into that kind of thing from pitching mechanics. It was the timing in which he said it. You don't say it after getting shelled by Oakland. If you want to say it a week later, 2 weeks later, then it's a fascinating thing. I think that was what most Jays fans are going to take issue with.
Yeah, save it for when you throw 7 shutout innings next time. Then I think it'll land a little better with Blue Jays fans. We haven't really seen, guys, a ton of frustration bubbling up and boiling over from this team. This is an example of some of that.
Agreed.
Bassitt is an emotional guy. He is not someone who is subtle with what he is feeling whatsoever. We haven't seen the explosion that I thought we would see this year. We haven't seen people taking shots through the media, which I thought we would see this year. We just really haven't. But you're going to see some of these maybe more individual frustrations bubbling up, and that's one from Bassitt. I don't know if it's one that he's going to be talking about again, but it came out.
I got to tell you, what I'm really excited for, Keegan Matheson joining us from MLB.com, and Dave, is I'm looking at the schedule. The next time Chris Bassitt is supposed to pitch at home is on Thursday, August 22nd against the same Angels. What if it's like a gray, cloudy day, 40% chance of precipitation? Do you think that Bassitt is going to have words with whoever's in charge of the roof?
Man, right back into R.A. Dickey territory there.
Yeah.
You got to play roof mechanic a little bit.
Yeah.
This is where the roof, and listen, God bless that roof. The more I travel in baseball, the more rain delays I sit through. I don't care how ugly that thing is. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, that roof. But it is old, and it cannot open and close unless the conditions are pretty nice. So that's going to be an interesting one. Maybe I usually don't like to bog myself down with pitch movement metrics during a game. I prefer to cover the sport of baseball that people actually understand. But maybe next time I'll crack that open, see how much the sinker is sinking.
Okay, so you're covering baseball at a very challenging moment, Keegan. Cauz and I were just batting around the notion of how do you sort of get interested? How do you find a focal point for the remaining games of this Blue Jays season when you see them 15.5 games out of the AL East lead? But you're getting paid decent money to do this, Keegan, and you're earning it. So
baseball media money, that's top
right,
dollar.
Big money to do this.
Lobster money.
Tell us, with all the expertise you gleaned at the ballpark through all your years out there, how do you do it?
Yeah, I tell you what, people think money is in playing baseball. Baby, it's in writing about baseball.
Hell yeah.
This is where the real cash is.
Yeah.
It's been interesting, guys, because these last few years I've been covering stretch runs where even if something extremely interesting does not happen, the game itself, whether it's a 3-2 win or a 7-1 loss, is on its own standing a story because they are 2.5 into the playoffs, 3.5 out of the playoffs. The standings day to day, the news of it all keeps you afloat. Now I'm covering a team where if they lose 10-0 tonight or if they win 20-0, I do not care. That does not matter all that much. It matters how it happens. And I think that the end of this year, it's all about individual focus. Now, if they lose 7-6, but Leo Jimenez makes a great play at shortstop and goes 3 for 4, that's the story. It is all about next year at this point. And I think we've almost moved, not all the way past, but we've mostly moved past the frustration of this season. This season is dead and buried. That happened before the trade deadline. It's not about the frustration and anger of a lost season anymore. It's about trying to salvage something from this fire that the Blue Jays have set themselves on. So whether that's young players coming up, we'll see another one tonight in Will Wagner. It's about the more individual angles. And it has been strange, I'll admit, guys, there's a couple of times where I'm sitting down in John Schneider's press conference room after a game, and the microphone typically comes to me first, and I'm pulling up a box score on my phone thinking, oh, man, I better figure out if Chris Bassitt threw 4 innings or 9 innings so I do not sound stupid here. It's interesting times.
I had a clever question scripted, but first.
Oh, wow.
How dare you say it like that? Keegan, how come you get to ask the first question? Well, what puts you at the top of the list?
I'm just always there.
Okay.
Fellas.
Fair.
It's that's just about it. Growing up, I remember my grandfather would always say you can either be talented or early. So I'm more of a games played guy. 162 games played. I'm probably hitting 200, but I'm in there every day, I guess.
So you're a compiler. That's what you're saying. You're a compiler.
Yeah, just a stat pattern.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right, I love it. Okay, so my clever question. Your new book coming out soon in 2025. The franchise, Toronto Blue Jays, a collection of stories and essays. It's coming in hardcover very soon. So, Keegan, what I'm curious about, do you have an essay on Rodgers' ownership? And if you do, how would it read about a majority owner since September of 2000, so nearly 25 years? One time they've won the American League East. 3 times they finished in second. They have a playoff record of 9-20 since they bought and owned the Blue Jays. What would the essay look like about the team's ownership?
It would be all over the place. And it does get into that a bit through some different chapters, the different eras of the book. And fellas, what are we talking right now? 6:15. I finished that book about an hour ago.
Oh,
so the
Congrats.
moment we stop talking, I'm going to walk over to the fridge, which is just camera right. And let me tell you, am I going to open that thing? But it's sprinkled throughout the book. And it was interesting to especially talk to people who had to deal with Rodgers' ownership before my time. I came in around those recent postseason runs, but there's a lot of time, a lot of Blue Jays history before that when the Blue Jays were not spending money, when they were not opening up their checkbooks like they are now. When I look at this iteration of the Blue Jays team, I don't put a ton of it on ownership. They're spending like they've never spent. They're just not putting a team together. I focus on the front office for that. But you also go back through times where they were not spending, where they were not surrounding star players. You think of the Hallidays, the Delgados, a lot of those players who should have been making postseason runs, who should have had more insulation around them. When I look at it now, looking at the ownership level, then down to the front office, certainly, when you look at what the front office has done since coming in, it's strange, guys, when I look at this, because looking at the roster, there's not an albatross contract. George Springer's contract does not look fantastic, but it was never going to at this point. There's not the guy making $100 million over the next 4 years who might not play. Lots of teams have a terrible contract. The big moves have worked out. Mark Shapiro kind of spoke to this the other day, that their big moves, finding talent has worked okay. It just hasn't been put together right. This front office has not found a way to win, despite having multiple opportunities to pivot and rebrand. A lot of front offices don't get those. A lot don't get 2 or 3. What's this going to be, the 4th? I think going into next year, rebranding the team from an offensive team to a defensive team. We have seen some of the best lineups in Blue Jays history, 2021. We've seen some of the best rotations the last couple of years, and there's nothing to show for it. These are teams that I mean, goodness, if I write another book 15, 20 years from now, these will be the chapters I write, wondering what happened. How did those rosters, those names, not win a postseason game?
Well, congrats on finishing the thing, Keegan. What was the process like for you? I know plenty of people that have attempted it, many people who've abandoned the writing of many a book that'll never be read. But how close were you, I should say, to giving it up? Because I know it's tough.
Oh, there were some points. Let me tell you, my beloved colleagues in the press box would surely have a better timeline of my meltdowns and near times I pulled the parachute on all of this. But it's gone back into last year, signed the contract for this book last offseason, and started it with a bit of a head of momentum in spring training when I thought that I'd be able to juggle all of this. The regular season started, and I was a little wrong about that. So this has been a late in the game process. Reminds me of being back in university, guys. If a essay is due on August 12th, you hand it in at 11:59 on August 12th. So it's been a bit of a rush over the last bit, but a fun process. You know, I'm having a lot of opportunities to talk to guys and say, tell me about the glory days. Tell me about the best days of your life, instead of what I do most days, which is, why'd you lose? Why did you strike out with a runner and score? So it's not that everyone in this book was happy to see me coming, saying the words, I'm writing a book, to people in the Blue Jays organization or around it. You know, folks get nervous. But at least I wasn't asking people, why'd you suck tonight? I do enough of that day to day. So it was refreshing, I think, in a way.
As we let you go, I'm no different than you two guys. I'm also a journalist with a capital J. What are you going to be opening from the fridge?
I think we are going to move into some Guinness here this evening. Maybe a nice bottle of Four Roses. But it feels like a Guinness evening. That's going to be the official beer of this book.
Yep.
Most nights, powered by it. I think I need to thank it in the acknowledgments, but that's the direction the night's headed now.
Okay, and I'm going to make a really musty old reference, and you guys can both just say no. Have you seen the movie Misery? I know it's from 1990. James Caan, Kathy Bates won the Oscar. Dave Feschuk, have you seen Misery?
Of course.
Okay, Keegan, a little bit younger. Have you seen Misery?
I have not. I was born in 1990.
Okay, well then, Keegan, thank you so much for joining us. MLB.com is where you can go. Keegan, where can people keep an eye out for your book?
We'll have an announcement coming soon with a cover. I guess I need to look good and get my own picture taken for that someday soon. But we'll have an announcement coming up with the pre-sale, cover release, all of that good stuff. The forward as well, I think people will enjoy. But coming up soon, and then we wait.
Thank you so much for joining us. And you got a bunch of hours before the Blue Jays. Go see Misery. It's a good movie.
All right, fellas.
All right, take care. Thanks so much. That was Keegan Matheson. And do you remember what James Caan would do after he would finish any one of his books? And I'm alienating the audience. There's no way producer Owen knows what the hell I'm talking about.
Nor do I, even though I saw the movie, 30-something years ago.
He would, after he finished the book, he would have a glass of Dom Perignon champagne, and he would smoke one cigarette. Because he quit smoking ages ago, but he would smoke one cigarette. And then that would become critical at the end of the movie, the final battle with him and Kathy Bates. And I suddenly thought about that when Keegan was on with us. And I know I'm realizing I'm alienating the entire audience by talking about a movie that did come out in 1990.
Oh, you never shy away from alienating the audience, Cauz.
Fair point.
That's why we love you.
Fair point.
But you know, I was thinking. You mentioned the Dom Perignon, which I believe is a champagne.
Yes, it is.
Right?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to offer to send over one of your finest bottles of bubbly to young Keegan there, and allow him to celebrate with a proper popping of a bottle. Do
you know how hard it is to ship booze in this country?
No.
It is not easy.
How about an Uber?
I could Uber it from here. Well, I mean, I guess he's
in LA though, I think.
Yeah, see,
that'd be an expensive Uber.
When he's in Toronto, then maybe.
Yeah.
But it's weird doing it with him on FaceTime. I'm looking at the stuff in the background. I'm trying to figure out, the painting and stuff like that. But you know what? The radio audience has no time and no interest for that. But man, it's got to be difficult covering the Jays at this point. Because the one thing I wonder about this, there are all the young guys that are going to be playing. Like young guys that were brought over, a lot of them from the Kikuchi trade.
Yeah, Will Wagner. The infielder they got from the Astros. He's playing tonight, brought up from Buffalo. That's a big one. A lot of people have high hopes for Will Wagner. He'll be active tonight and wearing number 7.
The thing is none of them feel like here's my question between now and the rest of the year. How many of the young guys that are brought up are going to be more just nice stories. You know, like, oh, this is great. He got a chance. And Cinderella stories.
Yeah.
I don't want Cinderella stories and feel-good stories. I want building block stories. This young guy that you see now playing in these games in late August and September, these are the building blocks from a guy you're going to see for the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years. And, you know, people far smarter than me will need to talk to, you know, but I haven't read anything that these guys can be building blocks. Right now, they feel like feel-good stories that could maybe become part of the roster, but no one that you're like, that guy there is going to be here. Get used to him.
Right. They didn't get Paul Skeens, right? They didn't get like the number one pick.
Yeah.
They got a bunch of lottery tickets, right? And, you know, I don't know what the odds of this lottery happen to be, but they got a dozen plus guys at the trade deadline of various ages and levels of ability. And, you know, it's impossible to say how many of them are actually going to make an impact on the franchise, right? But you're going to start to see pretty quickly, you know, because you're going to start to see him play.
Roy Halladay, the name got mentioned there. I've talked about this before. Roy Halladay was the rare athlete. You don't see this a lot in North America, who was at the peak of his powers and eventually wanted out. No Toronto fan begrudged him for it.
Yeah.
No Jays fan said, how dare you leave, or traitor, or any of these things that we see. Now, maybe part of it was in a delightful era before social media, so we didn't have to know other people's opinions. Oh, that was a good time. But because of how good he was, and at the time, Blue Jays didn't try to be a top 5 spending team, we all were like, go, Roy, go, please, go try to win somewhere. It's not going to happen here. And that's rare because as sports fans, we don't want anything taking away our sports happy.
Yeah.
And by Roy leaving, it's like, well, once every 5 days, I know my team can win. I'm now waving goodbye to that, and I'm fine with it.
And that says something about the folks who own the club at that time, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because people couldn't begrudge him. It was like, yeah, you're right, Roy. We're not winning here. And, you know, Keegan went through some of those seasons where, you know, they just weren't spending, and they weren't a serious contender, and nobody considered them a serious contender in an AL East with a shorter playoff format, with fewer teams making the playoffs, with the evil Empire Yankees and the high-spending Red Sox. And the Rays hadn't even emerged at that point as a force, like they are now. And the Orioles weren't particularly good, but it was just, you know, in that environment, they just weren't taken seriously. And Roy Halladay, in a lot of ways, people felt like he deserved the chance at playoff baseball, the chance at contending for a title.
If we put a list together, and we don't have time, there's, you know, we're entering the back half. Dave Naylor is going to join us on the other side. The list of the great Toronto athletes that get forgotten because they were stuck in the middle of irrelevance.
Yeah.
Carlos Delgado might be number one on that list. When you look at the seasons he had, a bunch of all-star years, some massive seasons, but part of that time when the Yankees and the Red Sox would spend $140 million more than the Blue Jays. Like, right. I think Delgado would be near the top of that list. I don't know, maybe some of the Chris Bosh years. I'm not sure. It's harder to be underrated or not. You don't think of when it comes to basketball. But I think Delgado be near the top.
Bosh was on some teams where, you know, he was the only thing going.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and even though he was an NBA All-Star or an All-Star to be, you know, you couldn't carry it. It was impossible for him to carry it. And you could, again, like, say what you will about super teams, but it was hard to begrudge him moving on to Miami at a certain point, given where his team was in their developmental arc, which was really not heading toward development.
Still remarkable, Miami lost that first title to Dallas.
Yeah.
Dirk Nowitzki and a lot of older veterans.
J.J. Barea
dominating LeBron James. Think about where LeBron was there before, the year before he won his first title, the Miami Heat. Compare that to the guy that, you know, had a triple-double against Serbia, had another great game against, or was it a triple-double against France?
Yeah.
It's sometimes hard to keep up with all of LeBron's greatness.
Well, it is. It's hard to, sometimes it's easy to forget that LeBron had some tough moments before he became, you know, the top player in the NBA. smartest guy in the NBA. Like, he was on that team in 2004 at the Olympics that couldn't beat Puerto Rico. They didn't have the maturity to beat Puerto Rico. That was mid-20s.
Puerto Rico blew him out. Blew him out back in 2004. Like, that's the remarkable thing.
And it goes to show, as much as people were talking about how, and I was one of them, saying, look, this is an old U.S. team, and it was an old U.S. team. That experience that LeBron gained in those tough moments against Puerto Rico and Lithuania in 2004, and obviously in plenty of playoff series through the ages, that's made him who he is, right? That's made him the formidable figure that he is, and the unbeatable player that he is at times.
14 points, 10 assists, 6 rebounds, 2 steals in the 98-87 win over France. The big star was Steph Curry for the second game in a row. On the other side, Dave Naylor, our TSN football insider, will join us. If Nathan Rourke can't make an NFL roster, and we'll see, he just got released by Atlanta, what's it going to take for when we see a Canadian, a CFL quarterback, making it south of the border? We'll talk about that, Buffalo Bills, and just sort of spin the wheel of NFL topics. Dave Naylor joins Overdrive next. Welcome back, everyone. This is Overdrive. I'm Matthew Cauz. That's Dave Feschuk. There's like some unauthorized biography, Aaron Rodgers book coming out. And I got to tell you, and, you know, he talks about how the mistake he made, about he shouldn't have, you know, lied, whatever wordplay was about not being immunized or whatever that.
Said he was immunized.
Immunized, whatever the hell it was.
When he was not vaccinated.
When he was not vaccinated. I got to tell you, I'm just bored with all things Aaron Rodgers.
Are you?
Yeah. I think until he's on the field, slinging it downfield to Garrett Wilson.
Hopping another Achilles, probably.
Yeah. I don't care about ayahuasca. I don't care about darkness retreats. I don't care about his thoughts on medicine, on Fauci, on being on Joe Rogan, like Pat McAfee.
Running for vice president.
Jimmy Kimmel. None of it.
You don't?
I don't care. I don't know why. I'm bored of all of it with Aaron Rodgers.
Well, phooey to you. My old colleague Ian O'Connor, one of the great sports writers.
He's a great writer.
Great writer's written plenty of good books, and this one I'm looking forward to. I'm not like you. I'm looking forward to, what is it called? The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers? Yeah. Something like that.
I don't know.
It sounds good.
Yeah,
it sounds like he's got some good stuff about the whole being estranged from the family and the girlfriend that sort of...
The family thing would interest me because that's been going on for ages.
Apparently Ian talks to the father and talks to Aaron about it at some point. I don't know how cooperative Rodgers was with O'Connor. It's unauthorized, but he certainly has interviewed Rodgers for the book. I don't know how many times and how much, but certainly Rodgers has said so much. There's so much that Rodgers had said on the Pat McAfee show, in various other forums where he talks about all this stuff outside the game and some stuff inside the game, that there's plenty of material there.
Big fan of Ian O'Connor, bored with Aaron Rodgers. You know, let's start with our next guest, TSN Football Insider. It's Dave Naylor. Dave, there's an unauthorized biography being put out by a very excellent writer, Ian O'Connor. But your interest level on all things Aaron Rodgers right now would be what?
Much higher than yours, Matt. Much higher than yours. Look, look, I'll tell you, I will always defer to guys that, are interesting. Like, and I mean interesting off the field. They share thoughts. I mean, one of the things that's, I think, been true about Aaron Rodgers is he's never hid the fact that he has interest well beyond football in a sport where sometimes, people want you to be all in on that and nothing else, which was why there was so much speculation when he missed the OTAs that, maybe he crossed a line in that regard or whatever. But the funny thing that stood out to me, just a very small thing, okay? When I was at Jets camp 3 weeks ago and Rodgers spoke, and the one little thing, he was explaining why he had gone to Egypt and why that had been, on his bucket list. And he talked about that since he was very young, Egypt and Greece had always been kind of in his imagination and all this. But he had to drop in that it was very young when he was at gifted school.
Right.
Huh?
Yeah, he just dropped that in there. That, it wasn't like when I was in school. He mentioned that it was gifted school.
Well,
yes, he did say that.
Yeah, not surprising. Not surprising. Hey, what's your theory, Naylor? We got plenty to get into here, but since we're talking about Aaron Rodgers and the interest level thereof, what's your level of confidence that he can be competitively relevant at age 40 coming off an Achilles?
Well, I can answer this two ways. One, look, if he had to be the Aaron Rodgers who's going to have to win it all by himself, not very high. And this is one of those things where I think we got to be careful not to make the outlier kind of the rule. Well, he's 40, okay? You want the list of guys who've played quarterback at 40-plus in the NFL? Let's see.
One.
Well, I mean, it's Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Brett Favre, Vinny Testaverde, Warren Moon, Steve DeBerg. There you go. That's it.
Yeah.
Maybe George Blanda or something like that. Like it's not a long list, okay? And I think, that Tom Brady was able to do what he was able to do. You're like, well, he did that at 45 or 46. Aaron Rodgers is only 40, but you throw in, the Achilles tear last year. You throw in the fact that it was statistically, I believe, his worst NFL season the year before that. That's a lot, historically to try and overcome. Now, the other part that makes me think he can be successful is the team that he's on. With the Jets having added 2 veteran tackles to their team this year, with them adding Mike Williams, with them having, Garrett Wilson being able to be 1,000-yard receiver in both his first 2 NFL seasons with an absolute, horrific array of quarterbacks throwing him the ball. With Brees Hall, I think their offense is set up for success. I don't know that Aaron Rodgers has to be the Aaron Rodgers of 5 or 6 years ago, MVP Aaron Rodgers, to get that team over the top. With the defense that they have and the offensive talent around him, he might just have to stay healthy and be pretty good, Aaron Rodgers. So I'm optimistic on the Jets. But, I mean, if this was a team where he was expected to kind of float all boats around him, I wouldn't be as optimistically so.
By the way, at the age of 43, George Blanda did kick a game-winning field goal against the New York Jets in the 1970 season. And that concludes our George Blanda conversation for this interview with Dave Naylor. Dave, if Nathan Rourke, if he can't make it, then it makes me wonder when we'll ever see a Canadian quarterback or a quarterback that had a lot of success in the CFL make it onto an NFL roster, just because we know how talented this guy is. But now he's been released by another team, the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, I threw out a tweet last night that got a ton of response.
I saw.
It was just saying that I was wondering the idea that if instead of running to the National Football League as quickly as he could after one season that was injury interrupted, and he was in the league for 2 years, but it was only one as the starter, should Nathan Rourke have tried to, stack 3 or 4 outstanding seasons in Canada and try to create more of a market or a hunger for himself in the NFL? Now, Nathan Rourke, his outstanding season in Canada, he was 24. So, let's say he tried to do 3 in a row, okay? This would be his age 26 season. So he would by no means would be, too old as a quarterback to try to go to the NFL at 27. Now, after I tweeted that, somebody texted me afterwards and said, I think that's what Bo Levi Mitchell did. And he's right. If you look at Bo Levi Mitchell, pretty much from, 2014 through to 2018, he's playing at an incredibly high level. I mean, historically for a CFL quarterback, especially if you want to check out his win percentage. And then he went to the NFL after the 2018 season, had 3 offers. I believe it was the Colts, the Broncos, and the Vikings. All of them saw him, sort of as a permanent backup who would help their starter prepare. There was no money up front. He had $700,000 on the table in Calgary. So if he gives up half a CFL season to try out in the NFL, it essentially is him paying $350,000 for an opportunity to try out in the NFL. And you can imagine how that would feel if by the end of the first week you were getting, 5 reps of practice or something like that, as can be. So, he wasn't convinced that he was going to get a real opportunity, and he wasn't going to cost himself a whole bunch of money by going through, what may have felt like a charade. So it has been tried that way. I mean, it's funny because you go back to 40 years ago. I mean, when Warren Moon went in 1984, I believe he got $1 million a year. If he wasn't the highest paid quarterback in the NFL coming from Canada, he would have been close. And of course, he walked right into a number 1 job. But that's a different era and a different time. Players nowadays, with the economic gap between where the NFL is and the CFL, there's basically a mantra: get to the NFL as quickly as you can, because the younger you are, the more they will consider you as investing in you for development. You want to get there and get the pension clock started, all that kind of thing. So I understand why Nathan Rourke took his opportunity as a kid who grew up in Oakville, but the NFL was always his first dream. But looking at how it's played out, I can't think that it, could have been much more frustrating had he, played in Canada, made a bit of money, stacked up a few good seasons, and taken a run at it a different way.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it, Dave. But obviously, living where he's living right now, he went unclaimed on the NFL waiver wire today. He's now a free agent. Do you have any idea what his next option might be or could be?
Well, he cleared waivers 2 weeks ago. And then, within a couple of days, he had a workout with Atlanta. And, of course, they signed him. And, I guess the kind of disconcerting thing about Atlanta releasing him so quick was Atlanta put a claim in on him in waivers in May when he was released by the released by the Patriots. And they got bumped by the Giants. So that's a team that had an interest in him back in the spring. They talked him up pretty good when they signed him about 2 weeks ago. And then they released him in, essentially 10 days. And I know the preseason game performance wasn't good, but I mean, how many practices he had? He's playing with the 3s and 4s. He hadn't been there for OTAs. There's all kinds of reasons why he wasn't necessarily set up for success. But hey, he's been released twice in 3 weeks. He's been on 4 teams in 10 months. When I saw him with the Giants, July 24th, 5th around, you could already see the fatigue, on the experience. Because the day I was there, he did not take a single rep, not one. And, and he hasn't played football, meaningful football in 20 months. So, look, there's lots, and this is, Buffalo has a quarterback injury. Detroit has a quarterback injury. There's lots of quarterback injuries popping up around the NFL, and nobody took a bite on them on waivers. Now, that doesn't mean that as this goes on, there won't be more, or the teams won't bring him in for a workout before they sign him, which is what happened with Atlanta. But, this felt different to me, just in terms of, where he is at in this journey. And I firmly believe he will wait it out this year. Again, quarterback injuries don't stop at the end of training camp. We've seen teams whose depth charts just get shredded. And I think he will wait it out for that opportunity to try to get onto an NFL team before the end of the year. And look, Nathan has made no secret of the fact that if he does return to Canada, his preferred destination is British Columbia. He's just bought a house there. He's got family roots there. He loves the city. He loves the staff there. And to return to BC right now, Vernon Adams is struggling. It's interesting. Vernon Adams hasn't played very well since, Nathan Rourke started getting released. I don't know if that's coincidence or not. But, just overall, I just think it's where we are on the CFL calendar. It's just a lot cleaner process for him to go back to BC this offseason because I think the Lions, Vernon Adams, and make room for him in a heartbeat. But trying to do that in the middle of the season, Vernon Adams was maybe the prohibitive favorite for the most outstanding player in the CFL the first half dozen games or so, but things have gone kind of sideways. And that just kind of even muddies the water a little more. But I don't expect Nathan Rourke to come back to the CFL before 2025. And when he does, I expect his first choice will be the BC Lions. But I also expect there will be teams not only try to get him there that offseason, but there may be teams, now that he's a free agent, that may be trying to lure him back as we speak.
Yeah, and I want to apologize to Vernon Adams. I loudly proclaimed in a column that he's going to win the MOP. Bad on me for that. Dave, just real quick about the CFL and quarterbacks. Davis Alexander has been good for an injured Cody Fajardo in Montreal. We're all waiting for Chad Kelly with the Argonauts. Taylor Powell replacing Bo Levi Mitchell. Trey Ford injury is a mystery. Waiting on the return of Trevor Harris in Saskatchewan. Jeremiah Masoli is back and starting for Ottawa this week. Have I kept up with all of it? It's hard to keep up with what's going on with quarterback roulette in the CFL, and there's only 9 teams.
Yeah. I was going to say, which one of those do you want to ask me about? Did you mention Trevor Harris coming back in that?
I did. Yeah, I did, but I said I said it all so quickly. Bad on me.
I said it all so quickly.
Yeah.
No, yeah. It really is. You look at right now, the only teams in the league that don't have some quarterback dynamic playing around them are Calgary and Winnipeg. That's it. Right? Like everybody else has some sort of issue about either who's being moved out or who's coming back or who's dealing with an injury. And the Bo Levi Mitchell one is I say it's curious, right? First of all, I think it's curious that they brought him back this year, right? Bo Levi Mitchell was benched for a playoff game last year, came into the game with 6 minutes left. He stood at his locker after the game and said, well, when you don't play your paid player in a playoff game, it's pretty obvious where this is going, or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. And then they brought him back, which, again, I just thought was curious. The belief was sort of that they believed enough in Taylor Powell that if things didn't go well with Bo Levi-Mitchell, they were going to make that move. Bo Levi-Mitchell took a significant pay cut this year as well. However, I would have to search, hard and long to find anybody in the history of pro football who was benched as a starting quarterback when they led the league in pass yards and passing touchdowns, as Bo Levi-Mitchell does. Most of their problems this season, I would say, have been on defense, but sometimes you got to shake some things up, and we'll see what Taylor Powell is all about with a year of experience under him. But I find this one, more. I found it a little curious when they brought him back in the first place, and now I find kind of the timing and the decision at this point to go another direction at quarterback a little curious as well.
Dave, always appreciate. Yes, it is curious. At one point, he was on pace for 6,000 yards, and now he's on the bench. Weird times. Always appreciate it. Thank you, Dave.
Good talking to you guys.
Yeah.
Good show. Yeah.
Thank you, Dave. That's Dave Naylor, TSN Football Insider. Yeah, I was just noticing all the quarterbacks in the CFL, and there's just all these injuries and just all these guys starting or out, and then we're waiting to see about Chad Kelly. Like right now, there's a lot of chaos right now.
Yeah, and it's to me the storyline of the moment is the Chad Kelly situation, right?
Yeah,
you got the reigning MOP in a bit of a limbo.
Yeah, we're just waiting to see, does he clear just with all the tests and everything that he had to go through to prove to be back, to be reinstated, and they're going to keep that pretty. I imagine the CFL pretty tight to the vest until we know. Actually, the Argonauts are doing fairly well considering they lost a lot of guys in free agency, and they haven't had Chad Kelly. And they beat Calgary last week. They've actually had a pretty good start to the year considering all the talent they lost in the offseason.
Yeah, and their best player.
Yeah, exactly.
To this suspension. So it's intriguing to me. I'm looking forward to seeing how it all shakes out and what's he going to look like.
Yeah,
if and when he gets back on the football field.
I'll tell you this: I'm going to bet the under. First game that he comes back.
That's one of your best bets.
That's going to be one of my best bets. Speaking of my FanDuel best bets, I think I just mispronounced bets. You know what? I went through the whole show. 646. I did not have one mispronunciation in the show for the entire day until right now.
Great job.
Thank you. Felt good.
Outstanding work.
Yeah. I feel like a pitcher. I made it 8 innings.
Yeah.
And then I just
broke up the no-hitter.
Yeah, just allowed a double. Yes, FanDuel best bets coming up next. Welcome back, everybody. This is Overdrive. That's Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star. I'm Matthew Cauz. Time now for today's best bets. They are powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. I'm going to start with Vlad, taking on the Angels. It's not like the Angels have got a murderer's row of pitchers.
No.
So I'm going to take him 2+ total bases at -125. Didn't have a hit yesterday, but over the 22 games, batted .494, 10 home runs, 11 doubles, 22 RBI, and a partridge in a pear tree on a streak that began on July 14th.
Starting a new streak.
Starting fresh. I'm going to bet the over, though, in the game tonight. 9.5 runs. No higher total on the board. And that's because a guy named Davis Daniel is pitching for the Angels, and spoiler alert, he's not that good. And he's taking on old Bowden Francis, whose the numbers actually aren't bad. But I will take the over. And then finally, the exact opposite, Atlanta at San Fran. I'm taking the under, 6.5 runs.
Okay.
Lowest total on the boards.
It's a low total.
Chris Sale has not given up more than 2 earned runs since June 1st versus Blake Snell. Last 5 starts, ERA, it's basically 1. So you're talking like primetime pitching matchup. I will take the under. Today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today and find thousands of ways to play. Please play responsibly, 18+ and physically located in Ontario. I'm trying to remember some of my other bets, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. But it's a light night. It's a light night in sports after 2+ weeks of Olympics, and it started with the drone controversy.
Yeah.
It ended with the women winning silver in volleyball and the men winning the 4x100 meter gold, 4x100 meter relay, and a ton in the middle. Like, this was a packed Olympics.
It really was. It's a come down, man. I'm feeling a little wistful.
Yeah.
Feeling a little sad.
Well, it's just, we could always just dip from the tree. The content tree would always bear fruit, whether it was, basketball or soccer and, Summer McIntosh, Ledecky, Simone Biles. There was always something.
You're right. And at least we'll have like all the NBA guys that were aggrieved, like the Jason Tatums of the world. Like that fruit will keep falling from that tree. Because like Boston is outraged that Jason Tatum has been snubbed. Gold medal be damned.
And Jaylen Brown wasn't picked for the team.
Yeah, it was a conspiracy. It might have been something to that Nike thing. But because he did tick off Nike.
Yeah.
And Nike's very powerful. But I loved how Halliburton handled it.
Yeah.
With the posting the photo with the gold medal and what was to paraphrase something like, when you do basically nothing on the group project but still get an A.
Yes.
Right? And he's like, yeah, I'm the bench warmer. I didn't see the floor, but I got a gold medal.
It's good not to take yourself too seriously. Dave, that'll wrap it up. Fun, always fun working with you, whether it's the morning show or here on Overdrive. Thanks so much.
Great seeing you, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Shout out to the guys behind the glass. Great job. You have been listening to Overdrive right here on TSN Radio.